Thanks for joining us on Always Be Connecting. We are at the halfway point with episode 24 out of 48. So we thought it would be a good time to talk to my inspiration and a person who has read all of the stories and knows how all the stories play out. Our friendly neighbourhood web slinger and partner in life, Tom Ragg.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here. It's about time.
So tell the audience a little bit about yourself, because you're the king of culture and you've grown up reading, watching. Tell us about your history.
I have always been a nerd, and I'm quite happy to say that and admit that. And when I was younger, about 15, I had someone say to me, "Embrace that which defines you." And I have always been a voracious reader. I have an incessant need to input things into myself and learn. And so, I started off obsessed with dinosaurs, as many young men are, and went through a lot of those sorts of things, moved into comic books. I had a Ninja Turtles phase, all of those sorts of things, and then got much more into science and things like that as I've grown older. And I just have this need to input learning. But on the flip side of that, the nerdiness is that I'm obsessed with big sprawling narratives and loving, it started out with Star Wars. I loved the Star Wars movies, but I adored the Star Wars books, and they had the expanded universe, which was all about stories that were canon to the films, and they could help you walk through the playground and of those films, and build your own stories and things like that. So expanded universe novels got me into, Dungeons and Dragons and a lot more of that sort of role-playing type things and creating. And essentially, I hope what you're gaining here is that from a very young age, I've been very nerdy, and I have managed to find a way to fuel that into what I do for a coin. And I've managed to have a bunch of different interesting career opportunities along that path, and each time it has tied very closely into this, ability I have to retain just enough to sound quite intelligent about a topic, or to springboard new ideas or create a different angle at coming at a problem. And yeah.
What is it about stories, do you think? What is there something in you that you need to understand about the community? Or
for me, one of the most pleasurable moments in life is when you are talking with someone and they start telling you a story that they know well and that they love and that they feel confident of the ending or the punchline or whatever, the journey of this story is going to be worthwhile. And the light that comes in someone's eyes as they begin telling a story that excites them, that transfers. And whether that's done sitting talking directly with someone, or someone's written a story, or someone's produced a film, that essence of storytelling is always the same of, I have something that I wish to share that will improve your life. Whether it's there's a moral of the story and you're learning something from it, whether it's a piece of information, whether it's a joke, whatever it is, there's something inherently fascinating about that moment. And I did a lot of magic in my time as well, and in magic there's the turn, the reveal, that sort of moment. I love that moment in a story when the unexpected comes in. I've done a lot of research and study on Joseph Campbell and all the people that are around story structure. And in Western culture, we have two stories. There is a stranger comes to town, or a man heads out on a journey. And that's kind of it. Everything folds into those two story paths, but it's what you do creatively within the confines of that. And then you've got the stages of heroism and all those sorts of things. So you can see if someone's very clever, then they're following all the rules, but at the same time they're breaking those conventions as they go.
Yeah.
So both sides of that are really enjoyable, whether it's a literary classic adhering to that stuff or someone that's really messing with the form.
So I really like the idea of idea sharing,
Mm.
of having conversations. Maybe a bit more sort of documentary style ish. And then there's sort of like the other side of the spectrum, which is straight up information sharing, like data. So what does a story do that that end of the spectrum can't?
Sure. Look, human connection and emotional resonance. Sorry, an emotional resonance in that you want to have an impact, and the best way to get someone to retain information is just to make it interesting, and whether that's putting it in an unexpected setting, whether it's making it comedic, whether it's having it delivered by children so it's more palatable. What is that way that you take that information and convey it? And it's the act of the story itself rather than the information. Um, and sitting down and trying to work out what the audience that you're delivering that message to, and retroactively trying to build the right mouthpiece to do so in order to have it retain the best. I'm fascinated with this idea of immersive storytelling, immersion, which museums, art galleries, theme parks, and zoos and aquariums, they're kind of the main ones of that. You also get some parks and things, but it's the idea of how do you tell story through space. You're not using words. You're not necessarily even using icons or any of the sort of cartography or any of that stuff that we use to communicate to each other. How do you actually use location? So you think about when you go to the zoo, if you're walking into the tigers area, they're probably going to have bamboo, or there might be depending on what region those particular tigers are from, maybe there's be a tuk-tuk or things like that that slowly start setting the idea, oh, okay, I'm in an Asian jungle now. And there's nothing that's communicated to you of you've been transported. But after a few moments of walking through that, your senses are so bombarded and overwhelmed by that new setting that it just starts to be accepted, and your brain starts to accept the fact that you have been transported somewhere else. So that's the most basic idea of this immersion thing, of how can you get someone so relaxed in a new atmosphere that they have opened themselves up to learn. And once they've gone through that path of, okay, I've been transported somewhere, I'm seeing something, this is incredible, there's the information panel that tells you that this animal is in danger, and in order to help this animal, all you need to do is X, Y, Z. Then there's a huge the potential for you to actually act upon that is much stronger, because you've been transported, you feel good, you have an emotional connection with an animal that you don't see in your everyday setting, you might never see in your country. You learn a bit about it. All of a sudden, you've got this empathy for a creature that you didn't have earlier, and then you're given a slight bit of a challenge of how you could change your own behavior in order to help this. That's really effective. So that's immersion.
Yeah. So there's a bit of history as well to that, hey. So like you've got some of the the great zoos of the world, and then the history of Walt Disney bringing his parks together. What's the sort of evolution of immersive storytelling?
Sure. Well, look, immersive. So much of it boils back to from what I see, it starts back at like amusement parks, which think like Luna Park or that old school Carney Island, very brightly lit, overwhelming. They were designed to separate you from your money.
Yeah, right.
And you had your carnival barkers that would say intentionally insulting things to get you to keep trying. And then Disney's deal was he was sitting at a Ferris wheel, and this was 20 years later when amusement parks. So I watch a lot of these documentaries and stuff, as Lynn's mentioned, and I retain enough that I can piece all this stuff together. But basically, highways were becoming a thing. Amusement parks traditionally were built at the end of a tram line, whether that was at the ocean or whatever, because that's where the most people would get off, and they could stop there and they might spend $1 at a time or whatever. When highways were coming in and people were moving to cars, the light rails, the trams, they were all disappearing. The amusement parks all went bust. So when Disney wanted to build Disneyland, it had been 15 years since there'd been any real success in that amusement park game, and everyone thought he was insane. He took his kids and was sitting in they were riding on a merry-go-round, and he was sitting off there, bored, and said, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a way for some family entertainment. There's got to be a way to bring everyone together. And that was his initial thing of how do we create an amusement or an attraction that can be for everyone. And, his original thoughts weren't around immersion, and it was as the budget grew, as he spent more time, as he brought all the stuff he'd learnt making animated movies of how do you make someone care about 24 pictures moving in a second? And he was the guy that solved that of getting an emotional response. The further he got into this idea of making an amusement park for the family, the more he realized that families are about shared stories. And, everyone's got their own story, but the people that know your story best generally are your family. They're the ones that are with you all the time. They're the ones that help you make those decisions.
They know your history.
And they're the ones that feature most prominently in your memories. So if he could create a place that you relive these memories of the films you'd seen as a family, then it becomes this huge cyclical nature. And that's partly why there's such nostalgia and love for these Disney parks as opposed to other amusement parks and things, is because of the focus on getting the family to enjoy the story together so that they leave with a family memory.
Mm. So, and it's also connecting as people. So really thinking about the person who's receiving, watching, experiencing at all times.
Yeah, and again, it's very easy to lose track of that if you would. We'll bring it back to theme park. Universal Studios was for a while, they're very focused on that teen market, and then they realized that they were losing out on, as those teens were growing older, they were having kids later. So suddenly that gap that used to occur of teens growing out of being interested in something and then becoming adults and their children getting into it suddenly lengthened. And they realized that they needed to cater.
Skipped a generation.
Yeah.
Right.
So all of a sudden it created this new, you both had to cater to, what are they called? Dinks? Sinks and Dinks?
Oh, Sinks and Dinks, yeah.
There was a whole new market that needed to be catered there. And that's where I truly believe a lot of the thinking behind the Harry Potter worlds that they've built at the Universal things that are so immersive is they're not targeting the kids that love Harry Potter. They're targeting the kids that grew up loving Harry Potter and are now Sinks and Dinks. But soon enough, we'll be having their own kids that love Fantastic Beasts, and so the cycle repeats.
Harry Potter is a great example of like how a book turned into everything.
It massively so. And Disney had the first bite of that apple, and they dropped it. They dropped the ball hard. They wanted to do a pretty standard dark ride, like something that you'd see in Fantasyland or something like that around Harry Potter. And she said no. She wanted full control. Rowling wanted complete control over everything, and Universal essentially backed the money truck up and said, you get final say on everything. And they pay a lot of, because Universal don't make Harry Potter, that's Warner Brothers. Universal pay an awful lot of money every year. But that saved those theme parks.
What do you think J.K. Rowling's bottom line goal is? Like, what is her final say?
She's protecting the world that she built. And as of this point, every story that's come out of that world has come out of her pen. And so that makes a lot of sense, that to preserve the sanctity or whatever in fans' eyes, this is keeping in that she has disgraced herself a great deal, and a lot of people have issues with her and stuff. Before all that was happening, it was a celebrated fact that all of it, all the time came from her. And that's just a quality assurance type thing of, I want everything to be at the absolute highest level. And it meant that they couldn't cheap out on things. It meant that they couldn't cut corners or, that doesn't quite work. We'll just change this a little bit. No, this adheres to the story that people loved in the first place, and that adherence paid off in droves.
So she's immersed in her head of that world. So does that match to this immersive experience?
That's it. And she got to explain to the people making the films what it should look like in 3D fake world for them filming. So she had a pretty good idea then of how to explain it in a 3-dimensional that people could walk into. So that's and then, you know, they had the Harry Potter experience over the UK. So they had a few different bites of the apple first of trying it out of what a Harry Potter thing could be. And I think they realized very early on that the more you made it that people were living Harry Potter, the crazier it went. It kind of came in the...
And they do live it.
Well, it came at the right time. It was a huge kick up the butt for the entertainment industry, in the theme park industry. There hadn't been a huge jump like that in a couple of years. I think maybe the year before or something like that is when Disney announced they were doing the Cars Land at California Adventure, which is super immersive, and you know, you walk into that area and you genuinely feel like you're out in Nevada, out in the desert. They spent so much money on immersing it. However, you're still reminded of the fact that you're walking around 3D animated cars. The cars there are crazy and they don't look real. And then a year and a half later, Universal opened Harry Potter and you walk into Hogsmeade. It feels so real. It's not, the buildings aren't facades, you know what I mean? They're all working shops, and you can go into Ollivander's and there's the wand show and every little, so in Disney they call it a plussing. They're constantly plussing the park. How do you add to the experience so when someone comes back, they're not having the same experience? It's why the Jungle Cruise has, you know, unscripted jokes. It's because it's the same ride it's been since 1955.
It's the backside of water.
Yep, eighth wonder of the world. But you've got to keep plussing. And Universal plussed excuse the French, out of what immersion could be by, instead of, let's make the queue interesting. They went, no, let's make it from the second you walk through a gate, you are in this world. And that they adhered to that at every step of the way, and they cut no corners and instantly paid off for them. And, you know, they had queues out the door for months, and they had allocated ticketing, not just to get on the ride, but when you could go into Harry Potter Land and you'd have your 3 hours, that's when you could visit, this sort of stuff. And then they opened the second world where you go around Diagon Alley, and for my money, that's even more trippy and immersive. There's the dragon on the roof breathing fire, and, you know, they keep adding. So they've got wands that are interactive, and if you go up to, you stand on the right spot, and it's RFID technology and stuff, but if you stand in the right spot and move the wand in the right way, things in that world interact with you. So maybe a bucket will tip over on and throw water on someone else who has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And you know what I call it? Mischief made.
And this brings back to a word that you stand by as a sort of core value of levity. So these immersive experiences, is that the key end goal, to create levity for people?
So much of it, levity is one of the emotions in that toolbox. I'd say it's more surprise. And levity is part of that because, you know, surprise leads to two ways. Surprise is either panic, or surprise leads to levity. It's, do you know what I mean? It's that sort of thing. It's stirring something in someone to evoke a response. And you think about all the best theme park attractions you've been to and stuff like that. Sometimes it's not until you are sitting down on the roller coaster and you're getting strapped in, that's when the butterflies start. But I've been on other ones where they have whispers in the queue, and maybe there's some flashing lights and stuff, and the tension starts really ratcheting up. So by the time you're on this coaster, you're already sweating and you're primed and ready. That's the difference that immersion can make. It takes it from being a ride to an experience. And if you've added that extra stuff before, I mean, There's roller coasters that have music as you go. I went
Yeah.
on one called X2. You'd hate it. It's like a roller coaster, but there's a gimbal in the middle and the seats sit out to the side and spin independently.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds awful.
It's insane. And you go up 200 feet or something like that. So it's really, really high, 215 feet drop. So I think that makes it a hyper, not giga, coaster. As you drop, Sabotage by Beastie Boys starts
Amazing.
playing, and you're
Waiting for the drop.
Yep. And it hits, and the scream hits.
Because you know when it's coming when that song comes in.
And if you've got the right seat in like the third or fourth car, you hit the dip and get the G-force on the wah and things like that. That is a one-of-a-kind experience that I'll remember for the rest of my life. And that took so many different people working together.
Yeah.
Because no engineer is going to have that idea. That's not something that comes from a physicist's mind of how they're putting together to make you feel things when you're going through hill climbs or lift, whatever, things like that. That's someone who's gone, you know what would be pretty awesome? If we rode this coaster a bunch of times, listening to different music until we find the right needle drop for this experience. It's no different to James Gunn using pop songs in Guardians of the Galaxy at that right moment where you're like, oh, Jackson 5, that's right. I like watching Baby Groot dance to that. It's that same thing, but you're in the story. You're on this coaster. You're worried you're going to die. And they've created this thing where, you know, you go up and it's ratcheting and they know the tension's building and
And a lot of the history of how they do that teamwork is comes from the Imagineers. That's sort of the origin story of building experiences.
Yeah, so if you work for Walt Disney in the creative department, coming up with things normally for the theme park, but also other parts of the business, then you're called an Imagineer, WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering. And I have read a lot of books on their methods and stuff, and it's all about being loose and being open and being receptive, because it's very easy when you're throwing ideas around with someone to just, I don't know about that, or no, that's not right. It's very difficult to train yourself to be open and say, oh, that's funny. And I was fortunate enough that I've lived with comedians and done some comedy and stuff in the past, and I'm fascinated with that way of coming at things, and it just tied nice. Sorry. And it happened to tie very nicely to what the Imagineers do, which is, I don't know if they still do it, but back in the day, they'd Walt would put a bowl in the middle of the room, and if you said the words no or but, then you put $1 in the bowl. And at the end of the meeting, there'd be enough money that they could get a pizza delivered or something like that. And that's how he trained his guys to the rule of improv is yes and. It's how do you build on someone else's idea. So it's not shutting things down. It's that, okay, my idea might not be right now, but there's definitely a kernel in there that we can try and use and see if that goes somewhere. And you throw it around a while, maybe it doesn't go anywhere, but there is no harm in seeing where an idea can go. That's what comedy is about. It's taking an idea to its logical and then illogical conclusion. And when you're doing creative work, oftentimes you can go, it's a good thing to go to the logical conclusion and then go a step or two past that, because that's how you come up with a man in a gorilla suit playing the drums for Cadbury or things like it's that crazy idea that for no reason connects.
Yeah. So you know a lot of things. You've read a lot about other people doing it, and then you entered into the commercial space, working at Yahoo and working at an agency. How do you take what you know from reading comics, reading about immersive experiences in particular, and bringing that to someone selling some chocolate?
The honest answer is forcing it down their throats. But the true answer is I watch all this stuff and I catalog it. I make no secret of the fact that I have very strong ADHD and OCD. And the OCD, my particular tick is that I catalog and remember things. So it's not like I don't have, what do you call it, photo?
Oh, yeah. Like Sam Beckett from Quantum Leap
Yeah.
had.
Anyway.
Is it photographic memory?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's not like photographic memory, but I remember kernels of stuff and ideas, and it's really handy when you're in a situation, you're throwing around ideas, and you can be like, oh, that reminds me of this thing I saw. On this, someone had a problem to solve, and they came at it from this angle. And that sort of alternate way of thinking has been really, really useful to not only create stuff that references things that are very, mainstream and well-known in pop culture, and it helps you to aim for the lowest common denominator for a joke to make sure that most people can get it. So much of it is about passion and the stuff that I get excited about. So I can bring up these little tidbits of things that I've learned from elsewhere or ideas that might be to that, but I can also be very excited and that excitement translates to sales. So,
but it's not just what you bring; it's what that the people want to see. Like,
sure.
So people, like Walt Disney, who's like looking around while his daughter's on the ride, thinking, "Well, this is a bit shit."
Sure.
Like, how do you make things less shit?
Well, look, you mentioned Yahoo and agency. I had two very different roles, but both of them were dancing on stage for the public all the time. And any work I did was going out to be seen by thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people and stuff like that. So you learn to be as good as your last work, and you learn to be soaking in what is popular or what is in the zeitgeist right now, not in a way to how can I copy this, but more in a way of what's the visual look and feel that people are responding to? What's the style of comedy that people are enjoying right now? Because that stuff's always evolving and you want to be fresh. And, I was there right when social media was starting and pardon me, was doing, I remember doing campaigns on Friendster and LiveJournal and things like that. It was a very different time then, and a lot of the tricks I learned that worked well at first was back when social media was a real pull. We say push and pull. You think back to your MySpace, you set up your top 8. When Facebook first launched the news feed, it was just your friends, all things like that. And it was all about a curated experience of things that you chose. And then money got involved and everyone realized that you could spend money to feature in news feeds, and then it all became push. And so there was a real shift in how audiences responded to things, because it used to be very difficult to get lots of people to see something online unless it was super viral, and then they would share it to each other. And then the game changed that you could make something that was a bit viral to get the ball rolling and then throw money behind it. And these days, it's pretty much they're two separate things again, But people want organic, nice things. The stuff that
they want that surprise.
They want the surprise.
Levity.
They want the levity. If you can give people a moment of joy, that's so much more powerful than if you make someone laugh. They're like 5 times more likely to remember the information you were just saying the sentence before, because you've given them a boost of serotonin. They feel good. There's an associated warmth towards what you've just said that's lodged in their brain. that's the whole thing of it takes more muscles to frown than it does to smile. Well, that's because humans want to smile. We crave closure. It's again the whole story thing. Not to get nihilistic and existential and stuff, but there is no order in the universe. It's all chaos. It's all chance. And we have no real bearing on anything. We can make a few decisions for ourselves, but we create this great narrative above us that we are in control of our life or that some mystical force is moving things for us. And whatever it is, that's our own ego and narcissism in trying to impact on and just give ourselves some sort of relevancy and make ourselves feel like we do justifiably matter. And in your own story, you are the most important. But if you move 2 steps away from you, people are not thinking of you particularly often. If you are creating jokes when you're seeing them, then you are someone they look forward to seeing. And things like that. So it
doesn't necessarily need to be jokes though. Hey,
no, not
could
jokes.
Still be like Harry Potter's not very funny, but it's still
it's a
that
warmth.
Yeah.
There's a warmth. There's a nostalgia. There's again a connection to a positive memory.
Yeah. So I mean that's a culture. Like if you're going into marketing terms, and you've got
but brands,
cultures and communities and
brands can do that. And that for a while there, I won't say who, but there was an energy drink company that I was running their social media, and it was literally just shit posting. If you don't know that term, that is memes made for the internet where you're intentionally using as little effort as possible in order to convey a joke quickly. And so for a big...
But everyone's shitposting now.
Everyone is shitposting now. And we were doing this 10, 11 years ago, and it was naughty and very risque and appreciated by young people because, I put in the extra work on this brand and I would stay up till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock on a Friday night commenting, replying to people, making jokes, doing extra posts and stuff like that, building a little community around the idea of isn't this crazy that this big brand is spending money to make the content you actually enjoy? And, they moved away from that strategy after a while, which totally respect. It was right for their growth, at the time. But I really look back on that fondly. And there are a few people that I still have connections with online that bring it up from time to time of like, do you miss that? I'm like, yeah, I really do. Because it was just a specific time. You couldn't do it today because you just lost in the noise. But at the time, it was that knowing the audience. When we started working with this brand, they thought they were chasing someone. Working with us for a little bit, they realized the opportunity that was actually there. We helped them with this, let's say 6 to 12 month different strategy progression online as they rearranged their above the line media to match this younger demographic they were going for. And then when it all synchronized, they could pull us back because we'd done the legwork for them.
So there's ways as a business to use these strategies for good.
Yes.
And bad.
Very much so. The agency I was at got bought out by a multinational, boo, and within a few weeks I had been moved over to work on sports bet and alcohol brands, and I had a huge moral problem with that because online media is pester power, and the last thing with someone with an addiction needs is to constantly be reminded when they're doom scrolling or they're going to this thing that's meant to be a release from the reality that they're actually in. That's what most people are trying to use social media for, to be bombarded without their knowledge that someone's paying to hit them with gambling or alcohol or whatever it is type ads is evil shit. Excuse the French, but I feel very strongly against it. There are people that do it.
Because you know how the mechanism works. I know
how the sausage is made.
Yeah. That it's a little bit more calculated than here's a post.
It is incredibly calculated. And what you see is it's not determined by you.
Interesting, yeah.
On any platform. Google, you go there, search there. Maybe if you're looking at the third or fourth page. Yeah. Facebook, you've got to scroll for a long time before you start seeing one of your friends' posts.
So how do you navigate social media for yourself?
I block a lot of things, and it took me a long time to realize that the power of the block, the algorithm learns that if you start blocking things, that you'll spend less time, so it will stop pushing as hard on you if you do.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Push
Make
back.
your own algorithm.
Yep. I'm very limited with how much time I will spend on there. In that, 5 minutes tops. I don't need to. I want to pop in and see what my friends are up to. Maybe get a couple of news stories and see a funny video or something. I'm still old school that if I want to watch videos, I'll go to YouTube or I'll jump out of that platform to go and watch elsewhere. I know, like, our daughter is very into the TikTok and that sort of stuff, and that short form, sure, but I think I'm in a bit of a unique position as I haven't worked full time in social media in quite some time. I'm known as the old man of social media. I was potentially the first paid social media manager in Sydney. Long time ago.
Do you think social media is slowing down? Do you think people are craving real life now? So will these immersive experiences be physical?
Look, I don't have an answer to that yet. I think Mark Zuckerberg desperately tried with his metaverse to create an online world. He's trying to take that step. It's not there yet. My money's on AR, not VR. I don't want goggles that lock me off from the world. Give me a chip in my eyeball that just brings up stuff like Terminator. I just want a HUD heads-up display. How useful would it be if every person you walked up to, it came up with their name and when you last saw them? None of that. Gary, you know what I mean? Things like that. I can see that sort of stuff, social media thing being useful to life in the real world setting. I don't like. I don't know.
Yeah. But what never changes though? Do you like? Is that levity, belonging? Because maybe with Harry Potter as well, if it's not funny, like they almost created something like an emo type community. Like instead of emo, they were Hufflepuffs or whatever.
Twilight.
Yeah.
So I think it was Simon Pegg who said this, but nerd is just another word for passionate. If you're nerdy about something, it's something that you care about, that it's connected with you, and that you've spent the time to either you've read that story so many times because it transports you. You've watched that film so many times because that character inspires you. Whatever it is, there's something about that piece of media that's resonated with you on a level that it is even just a slightest fraction impacted your personality. And some people choose to let that in and become cosplayers or LARP, or, live action role play or whatever, and go down that rabbit hole of becoming the character. And some people are happy just to read Jurassic Park once a year or whatever it is. It's that desire we all have to say, this is what I like because this is who I am. That will never change. And so whatever social media transitions or morphs into, because it continually will, and there'll be more platforms that come along, that desire from us, the end user, to showcase our uniqueness. That if you actually look, we're not unique at all. Everyone's got the same little bits. It's just where your Venn diagram overlaps. Some people have a bigger Venn diagram because they watch more shit. But that need to, it's almost tribalism. I'm Hufflepuff. That sort of stuff. That's just part of who we are. And the more we come together because of the internet, the more we will fracture and separate, because that's what humans have always done. Otherwise, we would have become one homogenous blob thousands of years ago as every tribe came together, because it would have been, high five, dudes. No. Every person has the idea they're right.
Yeah.
And online, you don't have to look someone in the eye to say that.
Yeah.
So I think we will always have the need to showcase our individuality through our interests, but at the same time, we will always have a combative nature where we want to tell someone else they're wrong.
Yeah.
And those are the two sides of social.
So, what do you think we can take out of what we've talked about today in terms of people and like always be connecting this, especially for people at work, hey, in terms of connecting with, because work relationships are different to normal, like your friends, because there's a bit more transience to it, if that's the right word. You know, next year maybe you're not working together. Correct. So how do people use this in work relationships, and how do people use this in commercial partnerships and building cultures and all that stuff?
The fact that people come and go, and as you say, it's transient, means there's a fantastic opportunity to learn from all those different people. And I don't mean that as in mentorships, but I mean it might be learning tolerance. It might what
Thank you, next style.
Yeah, but I love that. One of my sayings when we're in meetings and stuff with others, everyone has a good story. They might not be a good storyteller. That's what it's about. As I said before, getting that light in people's eyes. No matter who you work with, there's an opportunity to get that light from them and to find out what they're interested in. And it's probably going to have nothing to do with what your work is. But if you can find a work setting where you can ask them about something, or you notice they've got a photo of themselves fishing on their desk, and you ask about fishing, then all of a sudden they've created a more positive connection with you. And like, this is real simple humanity 101. But then they're going to think of you more positively that next time that the brief comes in, they've got to choose who's going to work on the team or things like that. So it's always just about how can you create these positive moments of interaction for yourself with other people that further endears yourself to them down the line, which, is exactly what a business is trying to do every time they're using the media.
Yeah, right.
They just want to remind you that they're here. Hey, remember that last time you came down to Baskin-Robbins and you picked one of our 31 flavors? They were really good, but have you tried the other 30? You haven't? Well, we're here. We're ready. Come on. Ice cream's good. You deserve an ice cream. So that's what online, that's what social media marketing should be doing, is just reminding people gently of the positive interactions they've had in the past. So if my advice to people is, if you can avoid putting out any negative stuff, do that. There's enough negativity on the internet already. People respond and recall the positive stuff far more efficiently.
Yeah, and the negative stuff ultimately crashes and burns. Well, what's kind of the trajectory of Lex Luthor or other villains?
So a villain always sees themselves as the hero of their own story. They are the hero because they're so emotionally invested in what they're trying to undertake, or the change they're trying to bring about upon their world or the whole world, is that they won't listen to the reason or the position of anybody else anymore. And that's the trap that you can fall into in a business, is if you close off, if you believe that the message that you've got is so watertight, it's so infallible, and that the public will roast you alive. And it's anytime you see someone come out swinging with a real hot take and get burned for it, you did that to yourself. Well, McDonald's, no one wants to know how you feel about Palestine.
Yeah.
Some people do, and they're crazy people that have nothing else to do other than harass companies online because they've got a bone to pick. Do these things. If you're going to support charities, do that behind the scenes. And then if you need to showcase what it was, don't showcase the boss of McDonald's shaking hands, giving over a check. Showcase a photo of some children enjoying the new things that were added to the hospital ward, and you say, we at McDonald's are proud to have brought this to fruition.
Show the impact, not the ego.
It's not about you. And it's very easy to forget that when you're running the company page for a large company, because you are so ingrained in that culture that you think people want to know what Tracy and Finance is up to, but no one cares about what Tracy and Finance is up to at all. Maybe you can put that on your LinkedIn once a month. The rest of the time, you should be talking about what you guys are doing for your customers or how your customers are using what you're doing, or just make it relatable all the time. Think about it.
Yeah.
Will someone care?
Unless Tracy from Finance is like a World Wrestling aficionado or really up on
The game has changed
her
so much.
Transformers knowledge.
The game has changed so much that back in the day, I used to be able to say with full conviction that if you are a brand and you are putting something on social media, you are interrupting a conversation, because people use, as I say, it was Paul. People used to be there to see what their friends were up to, and your stuff was getting served in the middle of that. And you had to make sure your stuff was good enough that wouldn't make someone go, oh, and hit unfollow. And that, now it's all reach and stuff like that. Back in the day, that was another metric. How many unfollows did we get that month? Because it was important. These days, you got bots and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Cheat, game the system, whatever. No one cares.
So, and what are you excited for? What does 2024 bring in the immersive world? World.
Okay, the thing that I'm most excited about now is there's a third Universal Studios park being built in Orlando at the moment called Epic Universe. It opens next year, but this is the first time that there has been a major, a Disney or Universal park built in the US in 2 decades, and more importantly, since the advent of social media and drones and all this sort of stuff. So not only there are people putting out hours-long videos every week covering off drone footage of what they see, because you can fly nearby. There's a woman who has been covering the patents that Universal has been lodging for the last few years. And so she revealed super early, they have a Donkey Kong roller coaster coming, right? And it's like the Donkey Kong mine cart from the game, which, if you remember, you get shot out of a barrel, and there are points where the track breaks and you have to pull the cart up and jump to get to the next part of the course. Well, they've somehow done this. And she knew this a few years ago because they filed a trademark and a patent for a roller coaster with a gimbal arm off the side. So the actual roller coaster is here, but the track is here. And you're sitting on a car that's there. This car is connected with a beam you can't see to the track underneath.
Smart.
So as it goes along, it can jump the track. It can tip sideways. It's going to break people's brains.
Yeah.
You are that's the next step of fear.
Yeah.
And they're doing it in a Donkey Kong ride where it's going to be so cheerful and happy, and then all of a sudden you're going to have a moment of absolute death-defying terror. That there has me super excited. This park is using everything they have learned from Harry Potter worlds, and the entire theme park is built that way. So it has a central hub called Celestial Hub, which has a roller coaster with a flux capacitor powering it on the back.
Nice.
Just as a shout out. It has How to Train Your Dragon Land, which is entirely themed around dragons and apparently has drones that fly overhead that are encased in dragons. So it looks like there's dragons flying above the sky all the time. There's a third Harry Potter world, which is the Ministry of Magic. And that's
Oh, really?
Yes.
Where's that?
So from what my understanding is, you're going to walk into 1930s or something Paris, which is the Fantastic Beast setting, and we're going to go into a giant circus tent, and that it's somewhere inside there we have to use one of the flues, which is the chimney thing, and then we will be transported into the UK Ministry of Magic from the Harry Potter films, which is where Dumbledore and He Who Shall Not Be Named have their giant battle with the water and all this sort of stuff, and it looks amazing. That's the Super Nintendo Land and their first ever horror themed land, which is the Universal Monsters Land, and it's Frankenstein, Creature of the Black Lagoon, Werewolf, all the Universal monsters from the 40s, 50s even for the 30s and stuff like that, that really helped set up that company. So they're going to celebrate that because they have these Halloween horror events in September and October each year that are huge draws for them. And this is the first permanent sort of setting they get to do that. And it's crazy that there's going to be year-round Halloween scares.
Amazing.
Yes.
So, and then finally, one book, one TV show people should watch.
Oh, goodness.
Especially around immersive experiences. Seems to be the theme today.
Okay. Give me a moment. Look, if we're talking a novel, it has to be Jurassic Park. I read that when I was very young. It's so important to my whole love of theme parks and stuff because it's clinical about it. And that
tells you what you should and shouldn't do.
It's that whole battle of a dreamer versus a realist. And you've got Hammond, who is this is nice, the lofty ideas, I can do this. And then the reality is, no, you don't control everything. So in terms of understanding story versus how your story is received, Jurassic Park was really, really important for me. And so I try and revisit that regularly. Look, in terms of TV stuff, I could make 1,000 different recommendations. I did 350 episodes of a TV recommendation podcast. But for what we've been talking about today, there's a couple of really great shows. There's a series called How Disney Built America. It's from the same people who do the series of the foods that built America and the mega brands that built America. And it's not made with Disney, so they are critical of him in parts. But the 4th episode of that is absolutely fascinating, and it talks a lot about basically the guy who actually saved Disney, who walked in boldly one day to Walt Disney and said, "I've got an idea, and I want to buy in right now. Here's every dollar I have access to. I think we should license Mickey Mouse." And it's 45 minutes about the secret brain behind Walt Disney.
Okay.
So, yeah, was hugely revelatory because I'd read bits and pieces about him all through the sanctioned lens of the Disney storytelling machine. But to hear it from outside that, from independent reporting and stuff like that, like, this guy actually deserves a lot more credit.
What's his name? You know?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I cannot remember. But he worked for Disney his entire life. And
what's the second show you'd recommend?
Look, on Disney Plus, you can catch it. So it's made by Disney, but it's called Behind the Attraction. It's actually executive produced by The Rock and his team. But that is a hour-long deep dive on each ride. And in terms of a good third of each episode is about how the story was picked or how they came to the decision to use the ride vehicles because, Walt was very clever at getting other people to pay for stuff. So he knew that he wanted to do something in some new rides for Disneyland and stuff. He put in a bid to work at the World's Fair. He got all these other companies to sponsor their stuff, and all the tech he developed, he brought back and built the Haunted Mansion, Space Mountain, all the, you know what I mean? Very, very clever guy. So, yeah, Behind the Attraction, you'll learn about how he was always thinking 8 steps ahead.
Interesting. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolute
and
pleasure.
Talking.
Thanks.
It's very strange being in a podcast situation with you
Isn't
and
it?
not on a different type of sofa. Hey.
Yeah.
Beautiful. If you enjoyed that episode, love a review, leave your thoughts on the old interweb, and hope to have you join us again next week.